Okay, are we ready? Mike, are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready. Yeah. Sorry. I thought we were doing like the 5, 4,
Four.
3.
Well, we can do that. You ready? 3. Hey everybody, it's Mark and Mike with Wake Up Call, and boy, are you lucky today because you do not have to listen to just Mike and I. You get to listen to a very special guest we have today, and we're going to cover some things that are really important and relevant in the industry, which is the industry statistics. So Mike, who do we have joining the Wake Up Call podcast?
Well, before I get into that, let me at least tee this up and say that if you have been paying attention to some of the news, Dave Perry wrote a story about it last week as an example. ISPA itself has put out a number of pieces about this. They have published their 2026 Mattress Industry Trends Report. And that trends report summarizes the final data from 2025. And if you haven't seen the headlines, I'll give them to you right now. Mattress units down 6.7%, mattress value down 4%, stationary foundation units down 25.2%, and foundation value down 23.5%. So those were some pretty big numbers. I think they caught a lot of people's attention. I want to also provide context. In my view, I don't think there's any real question, really. These numbers are without a doubt the best depiction we have of what's happening at a macro level in this category. So they are obviously much discussed, sometimes debated. A lot of great work goes into putting these numbers together. They are, in my view, extremely important for everyone in the category to understand what they mean, what they don't mean, and what you should take away from them. So we have the person who I think is as well equipped to speak about this as anyone else on the planet, and that is the person who put these numbers together, Mary Thorpe. She is the Director of Industry Research and Analytics for ISPA. She has, I believe, been with ISPA 2.5 years about, right? And
that's right.
Did you work with ISPA before that as a contractor too? No,
this is brand new. Mattress industry, brand new to me as of 2.5 years ago. So
Okay. Well, you're a quick study.
Mary, do you have a background in this kind of thing or
I have a background in data. So
data? Okay.
I worked for a long time in financial services, actually providing financial data and input to institutional investors about companies in terms of their governance and such. And then just a couple of years before I joined ISPA, I started focusing a lot on dashboards and analytics, and did some consulting work with different industries, a lot in pharma, actually, looking at what was going on in terms of employment information that they had. Happened to be during COVID, and there were obviously a number of new facilities that were getting developed around the world and understanding capacity and things like that. So I got into internal ops data and creating dashboards, and then just kind of shifted all that. I'm kind of a wannabe data geek with a business background, and then found myself here at ISPA.
Wannabe mattress geek, I think, is your new aspiration, right?
Well, 100%. I think I'm a full-on mattress geek. Full-on.
There you
That's
go.
true. How dare I suggest you
you're in good
had not
company.
earned that yet, 2.5 years in.
Yeah.
So, well, let's dive in. We want to make sure we make the most of this awesome time we have with you. Maybe you could give us just a little bit of background context for what ISPA is trying to capture with this type of reporting, and maybe even some history on how long this report has been published in its current form. And let's start with that.
Okay, yes. So ISPA, I believe, is over 100 years old. This particular report has been in existence for decades, early 1970s, I believe. And the goal is to estimate the total size of the U.S. market from a supply side perspective. So we're measuring wholesale shipments in the U.S. market and estimating the total industry size in terms of units and dollar value. So it's designed to answer that question, how big is the market? And not necessarily, and not how much did retailers sell. So it's that supply side measure that has stayed the core objective over time, tracking the industry trends and the units.
How much was produced as opposed to how much was sold?
Exactly. Yes.
Got it. And
exactly.
has the methodology evolved over time? I have imagine it must have to some degree.
It must have, right? Because the industry has seen so many changes. So yes, in terms of the mix of participating companies in the survey, enhanced validation processes. So as more and more data has been collected, better QC and validation procedures, updating weighting for the estimations, adapting to changes in industry structure. So we started collecting, not started collecting, but started reporting on the imports data, of course, as
When was
that
that?
became so
When did that
prevalent.
begin?
2016, I believe
Oh,
that
wow.
started.
Okay. Which in my
So
mind kind of is pretty close to the beginning of when that became a meaningful number, I would think.
I think so because ISPA has actually worked with the ITC to firm up some of those codes so that it wasn't a catch-all, anything you sleep on or anything anybody sleeps on type of category, including pet beds and cribs and all these things to try to truly capture adult-sized mattresses. So
Hmm.
that started consistently in 2016. So we started reporting the data.
Meaning those codes, you kind of nailed down the consistent use of those codes in around that time frame.
Yes, exactly. So
Got it.
yes, we're always looking at new data sources and, refining the estimation methods and stuff just to continue the consistency over time.
Well, since we're talking about definitions and codes and categories and stuff, that leads well into another question I had about foundations. What is the line that you draw around foundations that you include in this report? I mean, platforms, are those included? Slatted bases? Or is this just sort of the traditional kind of what you would have called a box spring 20 years ago kind of thing?
Yes. So for MITRE reporting, we're asking for stationary foundations. So anything not adjustable, any sort of non-adjustable foundation product. The survey specifically asks based on spring, foam, and an other category that includes platform and other fixed support foundation types. So
Okay.
that's how the data is collected.
Got it. Okay.
And to be clear on that one too, Mary, like when you say fixed platforms, so it's the type of bed frame. It used to be just a bed frame that the mattress and box spring sat on top of. But you're also talking about the ones that are taller that just really kind of replace a box spring, right? So it's that kind of foundation, to be clear.
Yes, that's likely in that other category, as long as
Okay.
it doesn't move. As long as it's
Right.
not adjustable, it's going to fall in that
Okay.
category.
Okay.
Okay. And in terms of the ratios, the back of the envelope math I did based on the blended averages that you provide was that maybe the number of foundation units that you're capturing is a little more than half of the total number of mattress units. Is that about right? 54% or so?
So I think it's certainly shifted a lot over time, and directionally it's right. I think it's closer to 40% actually. So the figure's closer to 40% in terms of units. Obviously, not every mattress is sold with a foundation today. So we've seen over the past 20 to 40 years, when I take a look at the data, we've seen the shift really cut in half roughly from where it was 20 to 40 years ago in terms of that
So
attachment
it
rate.
was the ratio of stationary foundations to mattresses produced was about 0.8 20 years ago, and now it's about 0.4.
Right,
Oh, wow. Okay.
right. Yes.
And then what is that ratio in terms of dollars? Is that
It's somewhere between 10, 12%.
okay? Got it.
So obviously the average price of a foundation is not near the wholesale mattress
Of
average
course.
unit price. So yes.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to have that context in my head as well.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think it's one of the most significant structural shifts really we've seen in the
yeah,
industry
that's a
over
major
time.
one. Now,
Hmm.
but that leads really well into a question about adjustables, which they were just touched upon kind of in a qualitative point in the summary. But I know you track adjustables to some degree. How much have adjustables kind of filled that gap, that 0.4 gap?
So the specifics I can't tell you off the top of my head, but
Okay.
we did track adjustables. It was actually a measure that was tracked historically by ISPA, and then it was more difficult to access the data, so it was incorporated again this year for our members in terms of the full more history on adjustable
Hmm.
foundations. We've seen certainly the adjustables take a big chunk out of the value in terms of value dollar. even with adjustables in the mix, we're not at the,
We're not at a point
I
0.8
don't,
total.
I don't think that's the case, but it's a good question. I'd have to check specifically, but it's
Okay.
closing the gap, certainly.
It closes the gap a little bit, but it doesn't close it entirely. Okay.
No.
But since we're talking about history, help us. We saw these numbers, these headlines. I think they really caught Mark and I's attention, and I'm sure many others,
Yeah.
especially the mattress numbers, obviously, because that's where the bulk of the value is, as you pointed out. Down almost 7% in units, down almost 4% in value. Help us put those in some historical context for us as to where we've been in recent years. How big of a decline is this relative to other down years that we've seen historically?
Yeah. I think when I look at putting it in context, it starts with that extraordinary growth that happened during the pandemic, that pandemic growth period. And over the past 4 years, I think a lot of the recent declines is tied to really normalizing since that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the recent declines are pointing to both that demand normalization plus the abysmal housing market that has struggled over the same amount of time, the inflation pressures, the consumers, the majority, I think, of American consumers are the cautious consumer, that has impacted something like a discretionary spend. So when I think of it in context, I think it's that combination of both the normalization from the unusually strong period with the market factors we've seen over the past 4 years.
So where does the end of 2025 leave us relative to where we were at the peak of those COVID kind of anomaly numbers? Or also, where does it leave us relative to where we were pre-COVID? Do you have a sense of kind of an aggregate where we are now relative to those two benchmarks?
So I believe we're down about 30% overall from those
The COVID peak?
2021. Yes,
Okay.
I believe so. That's the figure on the at top of my head. So I think that's right
Okay.
Mary, is that dollars?
in terms of units.
Okay, units. Okay.
hmm And then prior to that, other benchmark points. Yeah, I would have to go back and look to see when we were at at the same unit figure in time. It's interesting though, because it's such a different marketplace than it was. Like, let's say it was 2008, or that's a terrible example, but let's say it was 2011. It's such a different market at that point in time. So as far as the number of units comparing now versus that long ago,
A different market, how? Like in terms of the types of units being sold, the types of channels they're being sold through? What are you referring to there?
oh, yes, exactly. So sales channel, the composition of manufacturers at this time, the consolidation over the industry, the consumer environment in 2011 was versus what's happening now. So I guess that's what I mean in terms of it being an overall
Yeah,
different environment.
got it. Okay.
And assuming that e-commerce is mixed into that.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What are these numbers? So when we see total mattress market value goes down by, or units, I guess, goes down by 6.5%. Obviously, not every unit that you're reporting on is reported to you, right? Like there's some mix of numbers that are reported and then some numbers that you're making an estimate of, that you're modeling essentially. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, I wish it was 100% reported from your lips to God's ears. That would make
Yes.
life a
That's a
lot
call to
easier, but
action here for our listeners who aren't reporting. Yeah,
100%. So absolutely, it's both. So it is reported by the participating manufacturers that incorporates a significant percentage of the industry, and then yes, the remainder is estimated to reflect the total market.
got it. Can you give us any sense of like what share of the total units is reported volume versus the modeled estimates or what have you, or how that's changed over time?
Yes. So in all of the complete reports, we disclose the methodology and the percentage. In terms of the annual report, typically it's between 10 and 20% that's estimated. So that survey begins with our quarterly survey of, large industry players that are submitting their data on a quarterly basis. And then we have another annual survey that casts a really wide net to try to reach out to even more of the
Hmm.
producers, and typically it's about 10 to 20% that we're estimating. So
Okay, so that's 80, putting it another way, 80 to 90% of what you're adding up here and showing in your totals is based on actual reported, what you'd call hard numbers.
yes, exactly, which I think is very respectable for an
Y-
industry
Yeah.
association. I mean, no industry study is perfect, so I wish we had visibility into every transaction that's occurring at every company, but the goal is to give the best available information that
So
with a consistent methodology.
to drill down on that a little bit further, Mary, so 80 to 90% of your reported numbers are from reported numbers to you directly, right? So how much of the volume do you think that you capture in the industry? Like, I think that the number used to be that you're capturing through your partners who are actually reporting in. You're capturing maybe 40 to 50% of the industry volume, essentially. Where are you guys now on that? Do you have a feel?
Well, our goal is that we are presenting 100% of the market. So just
Okay.
a little bit behind what goes into the estimates is we do a census. So every 5 years, there's a broad industry census to build out as much as possible the most complete picture of everyone that's involved in the industry. So it includes ISPA's members, non-members, domestic, foreign-owned operations that are in the U.S., tracking down new entrants, mergers, acquisitions, consolidation, to really ensure we are capturing that total industry universe. So that process includes a lot of sources. We do it every 5 years, and as the years go by, that the percentage that we estimate increases. So we were closer to 20%, for example, because we were at the end, we're due for that census again. So currently the census is underway, which will be completed in Q4. And it's a very large process. We use our research partners. They're called Industry Insights. They actually conduct the survey and collect the data and aggregate it for ISPA. But we're looking at multiple data sources. It includes, business databases, historical industry lists, public records. We're able to use AI this year, which is great to do additional scraping in terms of where are there production facilities and what does the capacity look like, just really to get at, make sure we're counting everyone in the U.S. So I think to answer that was really long-winded, Mark, because I'm
Yeah.
happy about
No,
this
that's
census
good. That's
to
good.
Yeah.
to get at it. The goal is that we believe that we're capturing 100%. So when we say we're estimating the 10 to 20%, it's at the effort to have 100% of the supply.
And then you mentioned earlier codes and imports, right? And so that's definitely part of the industry. And so can
Hmm.
you talk a little bit about that? Because you're talking about domestic supply. How about the import side?
Yeah, so we're capturing the supply side of U.S. mattress units in the U.S. So imported units are part of that calculation. And as you know, a really important part of what we're trying to track in terms of understanding the true size of the market. The import data, I'm not sure the best time to talk about it, but the import data is a challenge. I think it's a challenge for all of us if considering tariff avoidance and inconsistent classifications in the codes and growing e-commerce and everything that's going on. It's something that we are constantly examining closely of how do we recognize that those factors are occurring, and how can we make the industry estimates as accurate as possible. So the imports and that data is something, you know, of great focus really right now at ISPA. We have a statistics committee. We're evaluating, all of these additional codes. We're working with the ITC and customs on education at the source to ensure things are coded the right way. So it's a major part of, I'd say, of what I'm focused on here in the research group.
Mary, is it fair to say that the challenge with estimating and reporting the domestic units is different from the imported units, in part because the exercise with domestic units is essentially identifying who are the producers, which is your 5-year annual survey, and making sure they're all kind of on our survey mailing list, if you will. And then just going out to them and seeing what responses you get back, and then having to basically look at the ones who didn't respond and go, okay, well, how much do we think they likely represent? Just what's our best modeled estimate, let's say. But whereas with the imported data, in theory, you should be getting 100% of that because it is coming from the trade department in some way, right? Like actual public data. However, like you said, there's issues with coding and perhaps people even deliberately trying to obfuscate what.
hmm
Well, because of the tariffs, all the circumvention.
Right. So there could be
Yeah.
some deliberate obfuscation of what's actually in these shipments. And so your challenge as far as like taking the reported numbers and grossing them up to an actual estimated total is different because it's less about who didn't report and more about, well, how much do we think we're just missing because of some of these issues that we just described. Is that fair?
Yes, I think that is fair. And because we are the industry advocate and association, we want to make the corrections at the source. So that's where this education to customs and the ITC, this is what a mattress is and is not. This, because a mattress is in a box doesn't mean it's not an adult size mattress. Those types of conversations we're continuing to have. And in the meantime, ISPA members, at least anyone who's subscribing to the reports, will see as the quarterly reports come out starting in Q2 that we will provide more information about what we're doing. So here are the codes and here's the data as we know it. And we're also evaluating these codes, these other catch-all codes, which likely there are adult mattresses in, and this is how we're looking at addressing the issue to one, estimate just how many and what we're doing to correct it at the source.
This is great. This is because a lot of what we just discussed answers some of the questions I had about what the process is that you go through to aggregate these numbers and ultimately translate what you get in terms of data to what we see in terms of the end report.
One quick second before we move past that, Mary, I'm really curious, like in all the work that you're doing, and I know it's hard because I've been part of that process in terms of tracking the numbers and the education. You're right, like at ports and with people in that space. It's a big process. It's not an easy thing to do to keep track of it. Also, I appreciate what you guys are doing there for sure. But as it relates to domestic supply versus imported supply, I've heard numbers as high as, and I didn't see any in the summary that we got from you guys, numbers as high as maybe 40 to 50% of units for finished mattresses are coming into the U.S. as imports. Is that accurate? Is that close?
So maybe I'm not sure your source and the methodology, and
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not
no,
sure
no.
that I'm not sure that anybody exactly knows to be
A
fair,
guy
and that's
told me.
okay. Yeah,
It's not.
I mean,
It's not a.
and it's okay.
Yeah,
In terms of the supply side, with the codes that we're tracking for the import figures, it's closer to 25% in terms of the
25%.
supply side of mattresses into the market. Is it higher? Likely, which is why we're going through this. I'm not I'm not sure on the 40%. I don't know who's right. I don't think I'm not sure anyone really knows. If someone does know, yeah, hit me up and let me know how you know.
But in your estimations, Mary, you are taking the units that are coded as mattresses and are shown in the import data, and then you're grossing that up somehow for like some factor that's meant to account for, well, there's probably, based on our past experience, we know that there's probably some that are coming across the border that are not properly coded. So we're going to kind of gross that up accordingly based on some ratio. Is that fair? Or are you not doing that when it comes to imports?
We are not doing that. That 25% is based on the codes that we're tracking that
Okay, so
we
that's
believe.
actually a hard number. Like those are units that we know exist and that we know came into the country
Right.
coded as mattresses.
Correct. Yes.
Got it.
Correct. So the what I was talking about, what we're going to start doing on a quarterly basis is, how can we create a proxy for these other codes where we think there may be adult size mattresses, and how can we estimate what that is? In the meantime, we can say, here's these other catch-all codes, here's the total number. But what we'd like to do over time is, obviously provide more value by saying, based on these factors, this is the true number. So it will just take a bit of time.
Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting. So that's the unreported side of the imports. On the domestic side, it seems like if you're getting 80 to 90% of your units from reporters, it seems like the ones who are non-reporters must be generally smaller companies. Is that fair to say, or are there some noteworthy ones in there?
I think it's fair to say there's noteworthy that are not reporting data that we're estimating.
Okay.
We do not disclose the list of
Who's
companies.
reporting? Right.
Exactly. Who is reporting? I believe we're aware of all of the companies and the size of the market.
Okay.
But yeah, I wish it would be wonderful. But I think there's some omissions that you could probably name off the top of your head that, we've reached out. I think there's maybe different reasons why companies are not reporting. I think there's survey fatigue and, some it's a technical capability and some that it's a confidentiality concern, despite a lot of efforts and years that has gone into our confidential research vendor that aggregates the data through their portal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's something we're still overcoming for a couple. So yes, I can't say we get all the big guys because I
Okay.
think there's a couple omissions that we would benefit from directly.
It used to be that you guys had an ISPA statistics committee. I can't think of a better party to attend than that session where everyone's sitting around talking about ISPA statistics. That would be.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Do you let them drink beer while they're in there, or is
anything,
it just
anything that makes them talk about numbers, anything.
anything at all? No, but is there still a statistics committee?
I can't tell you how much I value our statistics committee because not
So it's still
only,
there. Okay.
yes, and it's grown and it continues to grow. Not only do we all come together to discuss, so the figures that you saw were discussed at the statistics committee level first. We discussed to make sure, do a gut check, and they get to ask questions about methodology and data collection of the research vendor as well. Our forecast panel comes from the statistics committee for our forecast report. So not only are they key for our research publications, but I can also call the members and I've learned so much because it is industry leaders from major industry leading companies. So the statistics committee, huge shout out to them because they've been invaluable for us.
Mary, when you're estimating the unreported portion from these people that are, or the companies I should say, that are not reporting, what proxies do you lean on for that, or what signals are you using for that?
So starting with the reported data and trends among comparable companies, so as well as historical patterns and market indicators that may be happening in different regions, all of those factors are taken into consideration for the non-reported portion in order to develop that estimate.
So it's not so much company by company as it is done in the aggregate. Like this is, oh, well, we know that there's a certain amount of volume happening in the Southeast, and here's our non-reporting companies in the Southeast, so we think that they might likely account for this amount of volume. Is that what you're saying?
I don't believe it's company by company. I do think the companies are grouped into size, region,
Okay.
capacity, production, history, trends. I do think, but it's not an across the board. We assume that based on the companies that reported, here was their growth or decline, and let's apply that same percentage for these others or an estimate there. No, it's a lot more precise it's a lot more detailed than that.
Okay. But you don't have retail sell-through. You don't have like a cross-check of getting data from retailers about how much they're selling or anything like that to help you with that exercise. Is that right?
So not really. The report, because it's the supply side measurement, and we know that they're not going to be the same because of timing and promotions and new SKUs that we may see in the wholesale data that we don't see in the retail data yet until there's launches and pricing and promotion. So there's a timing issue there. It's certainly something that we use to provide useful context. The retailer data.
Yeah. Oh, so you do have some retailer data.
We're looking at retailer data,
Okay.
certainly, because it provides helpful context in terms of understanding, but it's not primarily tied to the estimates that we're making for non-reporters.
It's just a sanity check kind of a, okay.
It is.
To
Yes.
triangulate around everything you
Yeah.
added in
That
at
makes
that
sense.
point.
Got it. Okay.
Another quick question too on that, Mike, you made me think of something there when you talked about retailer input. When it goes back to the import side, are you, Mary, like really focused on the codes with the government and that's how you're tracking? Is there any input on imports from ISPA members or on the wholesale side, or are you just doing that through the codes that you're discovering in the government reporting?
So I think I understood your question. We would want to understand if there are U.S. producers that are importing, and there was a shift there in terms of imported mattresses from a U.S. producer perspective. That is, I'd say, part of the trends that we'd want to be tracking in terms of shifts for the domestic estimation. And then otherwise, it's directly from those specific codes that we specify for adult size mattresses. That's through the ITC. Did that answer it?
Yeah, but so they're not reporting then? Domestic manufacturers are not reporting if they import or they are? That's what I didn't get.
We use other sources to try to determine if U.S. producers are importing products as well. What U.S. producers will report to MITRE is that they've manufactured or produced a finished mattress and sent it within the United States.
Okay.
So, but what we want to understand for that estimation part is, is that happening? Are there imported, is that occurring? Imported mattresses at the domestic facility. They shouldn't be included in the survey because, like you said, essentially that's double counting. But we want to understand from an estimation perspective if there's some of that happening.
Got it.
Mary, one thing I was surprised to see in the numbers was that essentially the dollar value of mattresses went up. The units went down by more than the dollar value went down. So I would have thought just because of maybe a change in mix towards commodity units, we might have seen the opposite. And I'm curious, I did notice that you talked about size and size mix playing a role there where you saw that size mix moved towards larger sizes. And I'm curious if you have any sense or any way of estimating how big of a role did that play in affecting the dollar value of shipments?
Yeah. So bottom line, I'm not sure the exact effect. The size mix is always a factor. And we did see, because we specifically tracked shifts in mattress sizes, a shift towards larger mattresses, which of course are driving larger AUPs. I think the market value is ultimately influenced by the combination of things, like you said, volume and product mix and promotional activity and pricing. So as far as what contribution specifically size made, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I think it's a mix that really makes the value, and the premiumization that we hear a lot about in terms of mattresses. And I think there's a lot going into that huge disparity, pretty big disparity between the value and the unit.
Is there anything that you have that you could share that characterizes what the size shift was? And also, I'd be curious to know is it part of a long-term trend in that same direction, or was this kind of an outlier year in that regard? Or
so the detailed data is in the full Mattress Industry Trends Report for our ISPA members, which of course, I don't mean to tease, but that it's member-funded research that we, really try to focus on our members and what they need in terms of the report. To answer your question, yes, there has been a shift towards larger sizes.
Like a longer term shift?
Yes, exactly. But I do want to say the size data that we're publishing comes from U.S. producers. So it may be interesting to know, is it a U.S. producer versus imported? Mattresses are more the twin size full. I'm not sure. But when we've seen the domestic size shift, it has been a shift towards larger sizes.
Okay, got it. And you don't have equivalent size data for the imported numbers, or no?
No, I don't.
Okay.
We don't. Not at this time. I think we'd need to. We're always looking at new data sources to try to understand, particularly what's going on with imported goods online. So I mean, stay tuned for ISPA because we are really looking at other retail data that we can start to provide that additional level. But at this point, I don't have visibility into it.
I
Yeah.
wonder if this logic holds you guys, like if it's imports, Mike, coming in bed-in-a-box type e-commerce driven product, because they're lower in price, therefore probably for second room, guest room, second home things, right? Maybe not as many in the master bedroom.
And because they're lower in price, people maybe think, why not get a king instead of a queen?
Well, I was going the other way. I'm thinking because it's second, if it's guest room, I'm going to get a smaller bed because I don't need a king in my guest room. So I was thinking that if it's a lower price bed bought online, the logic might say that those would be smaller beds actually because it's for second, second bedroom or even second home. I don't know. It's an assumption, but I think it's an interesting thing to consider.
But what we've seen is that the numbers have suggested a move towards larger sizes. So that,
domestically, yes. She's not talking about imports though.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
I think, and this is one where I'm going to give anecdotal that I've heard, which is at the retail sales level as well, that they've seen a shift towards the higher size, the larger size mattresses. So that was something that was, one of those gut check items that I think overall in America, yes, the shift. But I think, Mark, the theory about imports or maybe online, whether it's coming domestically or imported, maybe smaller. I think that would be great theory for us to try to test.
I mean, if we're giving anecdotal theories about guest room and that type of mattresses, my theory is that with the commoditization.
Can I pause us and just say that Mary agreed with me on that point? Can we just capture that moment, Mike? All right, go ahead.
We could do that. Obviously, we'll cut that part, but no.
No. Anyway, I interrupted. Go ahead.
If we're giving theories, my theory is that because the commodity channel has offered such cheap mattresses that what would have been a hand-me-down situation where you give a mattress to your kid that was yours or you put it in your guest room that was in your master, now people are just as inclined to say, well, why not buy a cheap one through some of these commodity channels? And that might actually be the same size as the one that they would have otherwise given. And so less hand-me-downs, more buying a cheap replacement for the purpose that would have otherwise been served by a hand-me-down. Anyways, we're not here to do anecdotal suppositions. We're here to talk about data with the person who knows data. So let's get back to that.
I loved Mary's reaction. She was just nodding her head.
Yeah. And she's like, this is not my realm.
You've been around this a lot longer than I have. So I'm very, the anecdotal, I'm here to listen to you all.
Mike, I think your observation is good, Mary, and that's the interesting thing about this show, right? Mike's background, my background being different, but Mike's background being frontline with consumer, right, with good bed, and so he's seeing things, he sees questions people asks, and so I think that's a really good perspective to have, Mike, when it comes to that kind of stuff. So anyway, back to the data, shall we?
All right, yeah, let's get back to the data. So Mary, tell us, like, when you look across the reporting that you're able to do, where would you say you feel most confident in the numbers, where you just feel like, you know what, if I'm feet to the fire, I feel really good about this? And where is there maybe just on a relative basis, the least amount of certainty in what you have to report?
Yeah, on an annual level, I have to say most confident about those broad measures. The broad percent changes that we're seeing in terms of total market size, dollars, volume. I mean, they're supported by the greatest amount of direct reporting data and historical benchmarking. So as a data person, that feels good. I'm really looking forward to the updated census. It's every 5 years that there's a deep dive like this, and 5 years ago was 2021. So I mean, it's a different world. So I'm going to feel even more confident once we, complete that census and have a fresh look at what the total market looks like in the US. But I would say those broad measures is what I'm most confident about.
And what would you feel maybe there's the least opportunity to feel confident in, just given the limitations inherently?
So I think we talked about imports earlier.
Yeah.
And, it's something that we want to focus on. We want it to be right. And we're working on getting it there on both the, enforcement side and on the estimation side at ISPA. So
What would you like to put out there as kind of a call to action for anyone listening as like, hey, this would really help us improve the precision of these reports going forward? What can we help perhaps spread the word?
greater participation, greater manufacturer participation, of course. So if we can reach out, so what will happen with the census is then we're going to reach out to companies, phone calls, what's it look like? So, and all of those companies will be recruited to participate on both a quarterly and an annual basis. So greater participation, I would say my number one. And if there's any concerns related to it, call me and let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's an industry responsibility to understand what this total market size is. We'll continue to do the improvements in the import data. We're increasing our market visibility into the downstream channels. So understanding every additional source is really kind of validating and helping to refine the overall
Downstream
picture.
being retail channels?
Yes, exactly. And direct to consumer is captured in our wholesale data to those that shipments are, sold direct to consumer. So it's not missing, but just
Mm-hmm.
understanding this entire sales channel helps us to build even better estimates. So I'd say all efforts that just improve our visibility into the total universe is going to make the report even more precise.
What is the biggest misconception of this data that you have to defend or overcome, would you say?
Certainly get questions about supply side versus retail. Why does retail say this? And why does ISPA's data see that? So I think that they should track lockstep I think the distinction between the two types of data is really important. So you understand how to use the data, ISPA's supply side, and how to use the data specifically, like once that's understood. No industry study is perfect. So I think we do a really good job with the information and the data that we have. It's similar to government statistics. It's funny, actually, when I looked at employment data, whenever that was, a couple of weeks ago, BLS, their margin of error is plus or minus 100,000 jobs. So if it comes out that we've gained 100,000 jobs, that could actually be zero. So it's like, it's the key is understanding the information and the methodology and use the data for the information that it is. I would say another thing that I think about to be realistic is that businesses need to use, I think ISPA's data is very important and very reliable and robust and should be used. I also think it's one data source. So I think businesses should be looking at other data sources. We've talked about retail sales and other data. I just think in order to run your business, it is one aspect of what's happening in the industry among a lot, and information and data is power. So I'd say, those are the things that I tend to talk about a lot. I don't think we can have one single data source that's going to, magically make all clear for all businesses trying to operate right now.
Mary, just to put a finer point on your first answer to that, you're talking about that you want people to understand that this is production data, not retail data. So even if you had perfect information about how many units are sitting in inventory and how that inventory volume changed year over year, it would not affect these numbers, right? Because what you're capturing and what you're reporting is the amount produced or imported, but it's not intended to be a reflection of how many were sold. Correct?
That's correct. Yes,
Okay.
that's right. That's what I'm saying. And I think it's an important measure among many important measures. So
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Is there anything else that I think you kind of just covered it, but is there anything that you didn't cover that you also just wish more people understood about this reporting?
well, maybe you all can help me understand why it is taking so long for our industry to recover. I understand the demand surge. I understand the market factors, but if there's something that's surprising, it's taking a long time. And I think I feel pretty confident I'm going to sleep every night and you're going to sleep every night and laying on a mattress. And, so it's taking a long time to get out of this slump. So I think that's a bit surprising. I think all of us in the industry are probably asking that same question of, okay, when are things going to turn around? We're certainly due.
Yeah. Well, that is the $1 million question, maybe
Right.
$1 billion question. But
Yeah, billions, I'd say. Yeah.
It seems like every time we get ready to turn the corner, something else happens. It's a tariff, or the housing starts aren't what they should be, or, there's an election going on. So it seems like we keep getting roadblocks. But
yeah, I mean, we're going to be in an election year, obviously, but the housing market, it's obviously highly tied to that and interest rates.
Yep.
But I have this concern that lingers in my brain that when these macro conditions do come back and start to favor the industry again, housing, interest rates, and what have you, that the overall market will be smaller than we expected it to be based on what it used to be. I mean, the overall market for what you might consider premium products that are generally produced by domestic producers and so forth. But I don't know, and that's not showing up in your data, which is actually encouraging.
Yeah, I don't think it shows up in the retail data I use as well. I don't see it in that data either. I mean, it's not like we're seeing from 30 million on up to 35, 40 million units that are sold at retail, since that 2021 boom, including, online and in-store and all these things. So
do you have visibility of places? I know you can't say who, but like places like Amazon and the mattresses sold there and how many units that includes?
So not specifically for mattresses, but we are always seeking I do have a retail data source for mattresses. It doesn't split out specifically by the online vendors, but I know I can extrapolate that I don't think there's been significant increase in mattress sales. I guess the reason why I feel the numbers that overall the market hasn't shrunk in general is because I don't think retail is continuing to grow and grow that we're not seeing. It's not reflected at the retail level.
You don't think there's a bunch of units sold on Amazon that we're not getting, that we're not capturing?
I personally, no.
Okay.
Well, ISPA is going to keep working to try to really, again, it's the supply side, but we're looking at how to help bridge that gap between the supply side and the retail side, and welcome all discussion. I very much appreciate being on this podcast. I'm totally tickled, actually, and congratulations about the podcast. So I hope.
Is this your first podcast, Mary?
Obviously.
No,
great.
Stop. You've done great.
Who's on podcasts? I mean, I feel famous.
You are famous.
You were in such poor hands on your first podcast. I feel so badly about that, but you did phenomenal. This was awesome. Is there anything that you wish we'd asked you that we didn't ask you?
There you go.
How my hair looks so good? No, I don't know.
Yeah.
No.
How does it? What do you do?
What do you do?
Natural.
Natural.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'll hear this back and I'll think of 15 things, but I just very much appreciate the opportunity and appreciate the highlighting ISPA's data and research. I'm really proud of it, and I think we're doing a lot. And if there's ever questions about it, I hope industry participants would reach out and just understand all that is going into us trying to provide the best information.
Well, if I may say, you represented the data extremely well, and I think that you really highlighted just how much work goes into it and how much expertise you've developed around these numbers. You were able to answer all of these questions. So you did a phenomenal job, I think, representing that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And just a quick one before we go, Mary. Any sentiment about future state? Like, based on the ISPA statistics, the committee, any macro conditions, is there any thought around what we can expect going forward?
So our
signs of hope?
Yeah, we're definitely watching we're watching housing, of course, as everyone is, consumer sentiment, personal disposable income, if that lower part of the K consumers are going to be ready to have discretionary spending. So, we track all those macro factors and they're all built into that model. We'll do another ISPA forecast in November. around November, there will be another updated forecast for 2027. So yeah, those are the key factors that we'll continue to watch.
I used to work with, I was the chairman of the Better Sleep Council for a period of time. And that Mary Helen lady that you get to work with every day, I think she's awesome. And she's still she used to crack a whip on me. She was really tough on me. She would just beat me with a stick to get stuff done. Is she still driving things that way, or?
Absolutely. The Better Sleep Council has, I think, two really exciting bits of research that are going to come out in the second part of this year regarding, spend at the bedroom level, what consumers are saying, and, additional the buying journey, mattress buying journey. Mary Helen is such a huge asset to ISPA and to me. So yes, she is continuing to drive things forward with the Better Sleep Council and at ISPA. We're a small but mighty team over here, and she's a biggie.
Yes, she's awesome.
She is, no doubt. This has been awesome.
Oh my gosh, you guys are so, thank you. I think I might have drug your cool factor down a couple decibels.
No.
but I do.
Wait, we have a cool factor?
I'm pretty sure we don't have a cool
Yeah,
factor.
I doubt we do. That would be shocking.
I think you do. But the best of luck with the podcast. I think it's great, and I really appreciate being on. It was almost fun, like you said.
You guys are almost fun is maybe the best testimonial we have so far.
I think that's going at the top of the website. This has been awesome. Mary, thank you so much for your time here. I hope this has been as incredibly illuminating for our listeners as it has been for me personally. And I know next time we're going to be obviously spending most of the time on your hair and how you get that phenomenal volume. I love it. So look forward to that in a future episode.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Appreciate it very much. And for everybody, this has been Wake Up Call with Mark and Mike. And don't forget, subscribe, tell somebody that you listen to the show. If you like it, spread the good news, and let's keep the campfire burning strong.
We're out.